Trump's promises, he wants to make America great again, and part of his pitch is to increase trade tariffs with other countries to the extent of about 20%, which could include India, and 60% he says against China. How much of this is likely to come through?
You know, Trump
how much of this is maneuvering and posturing, and how much will he actually ram through?
You know, Trump is mostly an opportunist and a practical political deal maker. I think that a lot of what he says you have to take with a grain of salt. It's, you know, and so some of his programs will fade away, I think. The one thing about tariffs is, and that general protectionism, is that Trump has held this view forever. All the other views have come and gone. His first political statement was in 1985 when he was a candidate, when he was a real estate developer. He was a candidate for nothing. He took out a full-page ad in the New York Times, and it was an ad saying the Japanese, in those days, that was the fear, the Japanese were going to take over the world. The Japanese are, you know, are engaging in vicious, unfair trade. We should not be taking this lying down. We should slap tariffs on them. We should do all, you know, all this kind of thing. And by the way, the Europeans are also terrible because they don't pay us enough for our security. So those are the two things he's always believed, particularly on tariffs. So it's hard for me to believe that nothing will happen. I mean, this is a guy who's said many, many times that he's going to put 10% tariffs, or sometimes he says 20 on everybody, 60% on China. I think there is an element of threat and bluff, but there will be some tariffs. I think there's no question there'll be some tariffs, and you know, he's singled out India as having very high tariffs, which is true. India is probably the most protectionist large economy in the world today. So as somebody who basically believes that India would do much better with more open trade and would lift many, many people out of poverty if you were to be more integrated into the world economy, I hope that Trump actually has the effect is that he threatens India with tariffs. India decides in response they have to do a deal. Part of the deal is Indian tariffs go down. That would be great. But the overall effect of Trump tariffs will be probably greater protectionism in the world, less trade, less economic interaction, which in the long run is not a great thing.
Let's spend a moment on the US-China dynamic. He's threatening 60% tariffs, even if it isn't quite to that extent, it's lesser, but there will be more fragmentation of that equation. How does that impact countries like India? How do you see US-China play out over the next 4 years, particularly looked at from India's lens?
Look, for India, this is a golden opportunity. Trump is almost certainly going to put higher tariffs on China than anyone else. Even if they come up with a deal, I think there will be more tariffs on China. But even beyond that, American business in general is on a long de-risking process away from China. If you're an American CEO and you have, your only supplier is China, you are actively seeking to change that. Every American CEO. If you have 70% of your production, you're trying to get it to 50%. So the arrow is only moving in one direction. So far, to be fair, to be honest, India has not benefited that much from it. The major countries that have benefited are Vietnam, Mexico, a little bit Malaysia. India has not yet been able to be the manufacturing powerhouse that could replace China. And I don't have to tell you, there are all kinds of problems, regulatory problems, labor problems, why India is not a manufacturing powerhouse. And it still isn't. There is some hope in some areas. The Apple iPhone production is a very promising sign, but there are all kinds of problems. The simplest one, for example, is because India is so protectionist, a lot of manufacturing is now actually assembly. So you have to import intermediate goods from other countries, and India has very high tariffs on those. So until that's all lowered and regularized, it's hard. But now, if this push gets even further, you're going to need to find scale, because if you're going to get your production in China from 100% down to 80%, you can fill that 20% with Vietnam. But if you're going from 100 or 80% now to 40%, you need scale, you need volume. Only India can potentially provide that. So it's a real golden opportunity. And what India should be trying to do is not so much go for the very high-end chips and things like that, because you're going to be able to do 1 or 2 signature projects like that. But India is a poor country. It has a per capita GDP of 2,700, 2,800. Where it can excel is in large-scale manufacture of everything, you know, because it has cheap labor, it has land, it has the capacity to organize this all. So if it were to take this opportunity, India can find a way to become a manufacturing powerhouse that it has still not yet been.